you hear this? Apparently raccoons are now considered urban employees in Toronto, and they get benefits. I swear, I saw it on a reel.
Okay, so apparently Canada is switching to a 4-day weekend. Not like a 4-day work week, like a 4-day weekend.
I saw this thing that said if you don't take your shoes off on a plane, the airline can actually fine you. Like, it's a new rule. They're cracking down.
Or you could get the real story. Hi, I'm Karen Ciolin, an award-winning news reporter and host of the Big Story podcast. My team and I break down what's actually happening, from world-shaping events to the everyday stories that spark debate, so you can make sense of it all. We're here to explain what matters and why it matters to you, and give you the context you need for those kitchen table conversations. Trusted, Canadian-focused, curious, news that connects the dots. Listen to the Big Story wherever you get your podcasts.
Keep your wellness routine going strong all summer. Kachava's new travel packs help you stick to your daily ritual even when you're on the go. Just one packet of Kachava's all-in-one nutrition shake provides complete nutrition wherever you are. With 25 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, greens, adaptogens, and more. Simplify your daily ritual. Go to kachava.com and use code NEWS for 15% off. That's KACHAVA.com, code NEWS.
Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
We're going to talk a little bit about real estate today. The industrial category, commercial real estate, those big office towers and industrial complexes on the outskirts of the city. Well, they're pretty busy and seeing low vacancy rates right now. It appears that back to work, back to the office, has led to an increase in demand from corporate Canada to get people some space to work in those shiny towers in downtown cores. And despite the worries about the economy, there has not really been much of a slowdown when it comes to the demand for industrial capacity, logistics plants, the build out of those seeing strong demand. Welcome to In This Economy. My name is Mike Eppel, and to talk about the state of commercial and industrial real estate with me today is Adam Jacobs, the National Head of Research at Colliers Canada. Adam, thanks for joining me today.
I'm happy to be here, Mike. Always glad to talk to you.
So it looks like, Adam, that back to work is a thing when it comes to the corporate side of commercial real estate, those towers that had been built over the previous time, specifically in downtown Toronto. There's not a lot of space, is there, available, and people are back to the office.
Oh, I think people are coming back. I think the last 6 months, we've really seen the impact of return to office, especially downtown. I think when we look at this over the 5-6 year period of remote work lockdown, a lot of the impact of that was downtown. I would say less so in the suburbs, much more so in the financial core, right downtown, Path, Union Station area. That was where we saw the highest rise in vacancy, and it's where we're seeing the most rapid fall. You know, that's your big business center, your banks, government, insurance, law firms, accounting, consulting, and there's a pretty strong return to office momentum happening there. You could love it, you could hate it, but we're definitely seeing it in the data.
Well, here's the question. When people were working from home, and the talk for the longest time was, that's not going to change. Why would we change something that's working well? But all of a sudden, of course, the companies did an about face on that. Were there enough projects in the pipeline proposed to now all of a sudden meet the resurgence in demand?
I think for now we're okay. I think 5 years down the road, it'll be interesting. Now we're still at maybe double-digit vacancy, coming down more rapidly, like I said, downtown, but it's still higher. Certainly, if you look back 7 or 8 years, vacancy is way higher than it was. But I think, if you've been downtown, we went through a big cycle of construction. There's all sorts of shiny new buildings all over downtown, but that tends to come in cycles, and I wouldn't imagine there's anything happening for the rest of the decade. So now that we have people back in the office and probably shortly a return to population growth, there is a situation developing where I think in 4 or 5 years it might be pretty interesting and it might be pretty tight. But I think now it's still a little more balanced. The other thing I'll say is there's probably a bigger split than there's ever been between the highest quality, what you call trophy or AAA offices being absolutely full, and maybe some of the more middling offices being a lot more empty. I think usually those things kind of move together downtown. Right now, there's a pretty big split where the really premium stuff is full to the brim, and it's the maybe 40 to 50-year-old office that needs a little TLC where you're seeing more of the vacancy.
Well, has this led to an increase in pricing? Like, can the landlords or the owners of these buildings actually raise the rent and lease rates?
I think on the highest end, yes. I think if you're looking at the highest end of the market, rates are at record highs. But like I said, it's a little more mixed as you look at the rest of the market. If you have an older building that's 10 or 20% vacant, maybe you don't have as much leverage. And the challenge is really like the biggest tenants, the one who everyone wants, generally need a lot of space. They're not taking half of a floor; they're taking 10 floors. And that's very hard to find. In older buildings and just generally downtown, there isn't that big block of, I want 10 floors right next to each other, right on the path, right downtown. So it's a little more piecemeal, I think, than maybe it normally is, which is also tied to your question about not a lot of new development. When there's the new development, you spec it out all beforehand. That will be there in 5 years, and I would like 14 floors of that new building. But that's not really happening right now. So people have to kind of cobble it together, I think, a little more.
At some point, though, do you not run out of space? Driving along the Gardner Expressway, it doesn't appear to be a whole lot of room there to put up too many buildings. Or is it a case of, if you come inland a little bit, up Yonge Street, do you have to take down some older properties if you want to go, to multiple stories taller?
It's a fair question. The financial core is pretty jam-packed. I think we've seen more growth. South of Union Station didn't really used to be a office business type of area. It was the stadium and more of like an entertainment area. But we've really seen that grow up. You've got a lot of developments on York Street around there that are now, sort of premium offices. So I would say the kind of traditional financial core, Queen to Front is fairly full up, but there's always stuff on the margins, and I'd say there's been room south of what we consider the financial core to kind of spread the downtown and do those big trophy, 30, 40, 50-story projects. But yes, it's getting harder and harder to squeeze in those brand new 50-story towers. But you see them. I mean, I was just walking on Front Street. There's the new what they call TD Terrace right next to the convention center is squeezed in there on the corner. So it's still happening.
Well, maybe if Doug Ford gets his way and they build a new convention center, maybe they can find some space there. I don't know. We'll see.
I mean, there's certainly like a lot of this redevelopment still happening downtown. I think it's just their office has such a long timeline to build. I think that's one of the challenges we're contending with. It takes 5, 6, 7 years to build a brand new fancy office. That was fine, except we all just learned how much things can change in 5, 6, 7 years. I think more extremely than we've ever learned in the history of the country. So now it's a more difficult proposal, I think, maybe than it was in 2018 to say, hey, how about we build a big building? It'll take 5 years, but it'll be really worth it. Now it's 5 years seems a little riskier to people, I think.
Are suitors of some of the office spaces that's available, Adam, are they looking for specific amenities in some of these buildings or certain configurations that might have been different from the past? Or is that just, here's the space and do what you will with it?
No, I think that's a good question. I think there is a higher expectation for food, for coffee, for the view, for gyms, for prayer rooms, yoga, meeting areas. But I think that the amenity that seems to trump everything right now, and I think it's frustrating for people, is just like connectivity to Union Station, access to the path. It's after 5 years of hybrid work, you need to make it easy for the employees to come back. And the best thing you can do is be right next to the transit hub, be right next to the GO train and the terminus for the subway. The problem, if you're on the flip side, if your landlord is saying, well, my building is where it is. There's nothing I can do. I can change the lobby. I can change the coffee shop. I can't change the fact that it's, 1 kilometer from Union Station instead of 100 meters. So I think the amenity that's really in demand is just like ease of access and proximity to transit. But I think there is I would say the standard has been raised in a lot of buildings in terms of food, amenities, having, medical stuff, nail salons, dentist office, all of that is kind of like a lot more effort has gone into that because I think there's a need to make the office maybe a little more attractive. It's not just a given that every tenant needs an office. Now tenants consider remote and hybrid. So I think there's a little more work that's done in terms of inducing people that way.
Moving out from the downtown core, your study also looks at the situation with industrial production or vacancy rates, which would be more, I guess, the on the outskirts of the GTA to some extent, and you're seeing a drop in space availability there. Have we kind of maxed out the number of logistics plants that we can build at this point, Adam?
Well, I mean, that was an invulnerable market for probably 10 years. It just went up, 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 more development, higher rents, more sales, everything. But I'd say the last 2 years, it's leveled off pretty considerably. Cycles don't go on forever. And I would say that's an area that is probably a little more impacted by NAFTA and tariffs and exports and the trade war that we're dealing with. So there was, I think last year was a kind of flat year. Not a lot was built, not as much was leased, but people can't wait forever. I think the extreme uncertainty that we were at maybe a year and a half ago has kind of leveled out. There's trade is still happening. There's still, agriculture and e-commerce and all of these major tenants that still need to be there. So I think we're seeing the leasing certainly come back, and in an environment where not as much is being built. You mentioned it's easier to build warehouses than it is to build downtown offices, but you still do reach a limit where the cycle runs out. You're a little bit on the downside. It's harder to find the good projects than it used to be.
I'm just saying here about the fact that the industrial vacancy rate in Toronto is down to 2.2%, which indicates that the GTA, for all you talk about the Ontario economy, whether it's doing well or struggling under the weight of tariffs and trade with the United States, that indicates that there's not much space and business might be pretty good at the end of the day.
Yeah,
specifically in the industrial
sector.
sector.
Would be surprised to hear that, but there is still, you think about your major occupiers for big box retail, grocery, e-commerce. I think there was a fear that would be a lot more impacted by the trade war, and the wheel has kept spinning there, I think, more than we realize. And industrial, 2% is actually probably above where we were maybe a couple of years ago, but obviously that's still a very, very tight market. And it's as you said, the vacancy is coming down, and that tends to give people confidence for developing the next round of projects. If I build it now and I deliver it in 2 years, then rents will be higher and vacancy will be lower. And that's a situation I want to be in, where I can build the building and have some faith in the market going forward. So it's always been a strong market. It was a strong market 5 years ago. It was a strong market 10 years ago. And it just, it has been pretty resilient, even with this pretty big curveball with the NAFTA tariff situation.
Maybe we need to change the spotlight to maybe the transport truck index, because I'm not seeing any fewer trucks on the highways, which would indicate that they're shipping goods from point A to point B, and the more you see, the more business that they're doing. And then again, coming back to the demand for industrial real estate space, maybe it's all tied hand in hand.
Well, and I think we're also seeing there's this infrastructure boom and a big focus on new whatever nation building projects, rail, ports. Those tend to be pretty big users of industrial space. You need to store a lot of things. You need to have a lot of construction going on. So I think the money that we're starting to see flow into those projects, I think we're going to see that in the warehouse and in industrial market also pretty soon.
Adam Jacobs, thanks for joining me today.
Always appreciate it, Mike. Talk to you soon.
And that was Adam Jacobs, the National Head of Research at Colliers Canada. My name is Mike Eppel. You've been listening to In This Economy. If you want to contact me, I'm available at my email address, mike.eppel@rci.rogers.com. Always appreciate any feedback or insight or story ideas. On social, I go by @Eppman. That's EPPMAN. We'll talk again soon.